A landmark study tracking over 300,000 people found that social isolation carries the same mortality risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and no group in modern society is more quietly, persistently isolated than single men. Unmarried men die, on average, 8 to 17 years earlier than married men. Not a few months, not a year or two. Nearly 2 decades of life gone. And before you assume this is about lifestyle, diet, drinking, risk-taking, the research tells a different, far more uncomfortable story. Because the real reason single men die earlier isn't what they're doing to their bodies, it's what's happening, or rather, what isn't happening inside their minds. This video isn't about relationship advice, it's about a public health crisis hiding in plain sight. The loneliness epidemic. Most people think of loneliness as a feeling, something uncomfortable but manageable, something you push through. But loneliness, when it becomes chronic, isn't just emotional, it is physiological. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago spent decades studying loneliness and found that chronically lonely individuals show elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep architecture, impaired immune function, and accelerated cellular aging, measurable in their DNA through shortened telomere length. Think of it this way. Your body was built for connection, the same way it was built for food and water. When you go without food, your body activates a stress response, hunger, to drive you back toward what it needs. Loneliness is that same alarm system. But when the alarm rings long enough with no answer, it doesn't just make noise. It starts damaging the walls. And here's where single men face a unique and largely invisible problem. Because the damage isn't just biological, it starts far earlier, in the way men are taught to relate to their own emotional needs. Emotional stoicism and the social network gap. Here is something that rarely gets said clearly. For many men, a romantic partner isn't just a companion. She is their entire emotional support system. Research published in the American Journal of Men's Health found that men, on average, report having significantly fewer close friendships than women, are far less likely to disclose emotional distress to those friends, and are more likely to rely exclusively on a romantic partner for emotional intimacy. When that relationship ends, or never begins, the support structure doesn't thin out. It collapses entirely. Psychologist Ronald Levant coined the term normative male alexithymia, a socialized inability to identify and express emotional states, to describe what happens when boys are systematically taught that vulnerability is weakness. The result, by adulthood, is a man who may not even have the internal language to recognize that he is struggling, let alone ask for help. It's like being taught to ignore the warning lights on your car's dashboard. The engine doesn't stay fine just because you stopped looking. The problem compounds in silence. But there's a third layer to this, and it might be the most overlooked factor in the entire conversation. Beyond loneliness and emotional suppression, there is a third mechanism quietly at work: the loss of daily structure, accountability, and meaning that partnership provides. Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued in his foundational work, Man's Search for Meaning, that the will to meaning, a felt sense of purpose, is the primary driver of psychological and physical resilience. Relationships, at their best, are one of the most consistent sources of that meaning. Someone to come home to, someone whose well-being is tied to yours, a future that belongs to more than just yourself. Research from Brigham Young University confirmed this, finding that social connection, including the sense of being needed and responsible for another person, is one of the strongest independent predictors of longevity, surpassing both exercise and diet in statistical significance. The analogy here is stark. Imagine a ship with no destination. It doesn't just drift slowly, it deteriorates. The hull corrodes, the crew loses discipline. Humans without felt purpose do the same thing, not dramatically, but gradually, in ways that don't show up until the damage is already deep. This isn't a video telling single men to go find a partner. That's not what the research is saying. And it's not what this channel is about. What the research is saying is this: connection is not optional. It is load-bearing infrastructure for the human body and mind. And for men specifically, the cultural scripts around masculinity have made building that infrastructure outside of a romantic relationship feel unnecessary, even embarrassing. Studies on male friendship and well-being consistently show that men with at least 3 close, emotionally available friendships show dramatically lower rates of depression, cardiovascular disease, and early mortality, outcomes comparable to those seen in stable partnerships. The question worth sitting with isn't, "Why am I single?" It's this: do I have people in my life who actually know what's happening inside me? Not just what I'm doing, but how I'm doing. That gap, the gap between being known and being merely present, may be the most consequential health decision a man makes. And most men never frame it that way.